Fear Not, Episode 132. Hi, I'm Billy Atwell, and I believe that consistently facing your fears is the only way to realize your truest self and to make those confident choices that will help you to obtain your deepest held hopes and dreams. I have faith that this podcast series will show you that you are not alone, that it will strengthen you and give you courage to face your fears, and that it will help you to permanently cross over into a life of living beyond your fears. Join me on this journey as we listen and learn from others as they share their experiences in facing and overcoming their own fears. Hello, everybody. Today, you and I are going to be joined by Heather Avis. Welcome, Heather. How are you today?
Hi, I'm doing really well. Thank you for having me.
Are you ready to fear not today?
I am ready, yes.
Heather was an education specialist, teaching high school students, and like many couples, she and her husband faced the issue of infertility. Unable to have children biologically, Heather and her husband set out on the road to adoption. Joyfully, Heather became a full-time mom when she and her husband adopted their first daughter in 2008. Though not originally setting out to adopt a child with special needs, when opportunity presented itself to adopt Mason, they put their trust in God and took a leap of faith. Mason was born with Down syndrome, something a lot of people don't understand and fear. Shortly thereafter, in 2011, they adopted their second daughter, Truly, and in 2013, their son August was born, who was also born with Down syndrome. Passionate to share her message of how God has used these three precious children to bring joy to both she and her husband's lives and the lives of so many others, Heather founded her hit Instagram account @MacyMakesMyDay, which currently has 100,000 followers. She's also the author of The Lucky Few, Finding God's Best in the Most Unlikely Places. Heather, can you take a few moments to fill in those gaps and maybe give us an update on your personal life?
Yeah, definitely. That was a very accurate synopsis of my family. So, like you said, I've got our three kids, and we came to them in a way that we were never planning to come to our children initially. And God just really, I feel like I say God picked me up and drop-kicked me into the mud in the wilderness, far from the path it set out on. And I initially just felt like I was dirty and messy and frustrated and angry and sad and confused and scared and all those things. And I sat there long enough to see there was so much beauty to be discovered. And for me, that was my kids. That was adoption. That's Down syndrome. That's raising children who are a different race than me. And today my kids are 9, 6, and 3. They all are in school. This is our first year where all three of my kids are in school, and they're doing awesome. So my eldest and youngest, who have Down syndrome, have had heart surgeries and some other serious medical issues, all of which have been resolved by God's healing hand and incredible doctors. And we are just up to our eyeballs in school and dance class and tutoring and all of the things that come with raising three active small children.
Heather, would you also share with us today one of the biggest fears that you've had to face?
Definitely. I think one of my biggest fears that I've faced, and sometimes it still sneaks up on me, is having to let go of control and the fear of the unknown. For me, what that looked like all those years ago was this fear of, really it was once I lost my fertility, having to let go of all of the plans I had had for my life and not knowing what was ahead, and it terrified me. I felt totally out of control, like I was flailing around, like I couldn't grasp onto anything. And I was in that place of just complete vulnerability, feeling completely stripped bare. And it was where God really met me in those fears, and recognizing that when I actually let go, the unknown is always going to be there, right? As we move forward in our life, there's so many things that are unknown, some that are big, some that are small. And for me, I wanted to have some kind of a grasp and some kind of control on that. And God very gently and graciously pried my hands open and placed in them so much of what I had been avoiding. So for our first child, an adopted child who has special needs, who has Down syndrome and who has serious health issues. All of these things that prior to being in it and prior to holding that, or the Lord placed that in my hands, terrified me. The thought of all of those things terrified me, and the fact that it was out of my control was even scarier. And as we step towards each of our children, and as God has just graciously molded and shaped me because of our experiences and because of my experiences as a mother, I've been able to let go more and allow God to place in my hands what it is that He desires should be there, because I've recognized that it is always going to be better than what I could plan for, better than what I could hope for. That unknown that God sits in is always going to be better. And so I've lived that, and that's been a good lesson for me in my life. However, I am very human, and I still sit there sometimes with my kids. Like our middle daughter is, she's just a handful, and she is very feisty. And my husband and I look at each other and think, what is going to happen in 10 years when she's 16? And I think a lot of parents can ask themselves that question about their kids. But I look at that sometimes, and sometimes I'll let that fear creep back in. But then I have to go back to the truth that I know that God is there already in that place, that He is good, that He is faithful. And I know that because I've seen it, because of what He's done in my life.
Heather, could you explain a little bit more how you got to that point? Because placing your faith in God, which is the ultimate, can be scary. And when you're dealing with the unknown, that's maybe you could help us to, what other lessons did you learn that and how you got through it so that you can access that faith and just be comfortable?
Yeah, it's such a good question. And I wish I had like a pretty little bow to answer it with. But I can think back to moments, like I can visually see myself in my living room, just desperate and crying hysterically and shouting out to God, fist shaking at Him in the midst of my infertility and this desire to be a mom and this fear of what was to come, just feeling so frustrated. I can visually see myself there, and I just remember having this very simple truth whispered in my ear from the Lord that God is God, period, and having to hold on to that. And so I think for me, and I think for everybody, you have to go through it, which is kind of the bummer about all of it, to be able to hold on to those truths. You have to have the experience. So I didn't just all of a sudden become brave and have all this faith in who God is. I had to go through it. I had to have my doubts. I had to experience the pain. I had to sit in the dark places, and allow God to be there with me. There were lots of times that I sat there just with a bad attitude. I wasn't like this holy person on my knees constantly shouting out to the Lord, trusting Him, but His grace met me then and there. So it's just, like I said, I can't wrap it up with a pretty little bow. It's messy, and you have to sit in it, and you have to go through it and hold so tight to the truth that God is God, period. His goodness and His bigness and His faithfulness don't hinge on our ability to know the future or fill in the blank, whatever it is that we're afraid of, and that there is another side, and I'm on the other side, and that's why I can look back with such what's the word I'm looking for, confidence, and why I can say so confidently moving forward that God's got this, because I saw how He had it in those times that felt really scary to me. Does that all make sense?
Very much so. Would you be able to share other resources that you've come across that have helped you to deal with fear in general?
That is a really good question. I think it's really important to have a person or people to talk to. This definitely works well for my personality, but I think for people that tend to even just like close into themselves, to have a sounding board. So a good friend or a spouse or a parent or a family member who you can sit with and be sad with and be afraid with, but also who you can trust, and who when they are speaking to you, you can trust their words, you can trust their advice. So finding that person and then making sure that you are creating space to be around people who can be a good soundboard and who can listen and who can also tell you that you're going to be okay and tell you that you're not totally crazy in that season.
Are you ready for the speed run?
I think so.
What individual, whether they're fiction or real, has made the most impact on your life?
My daughter, Mason, my eldest daughter, Mason.
If you could instantly change one thing in the world, what would you change?
Currently in the life that I'm doing right now, I would change that the world would be fully inclusive of people who have different abilities.
What's your biggest weakness?
Self-doubt.
What's your biggest strength?
I think I'm a really good mom.
And if you could only have one book to read, what's that book going to be?
I'm going to go with Oswald Chambers, Utmost for His Highest. Utmost for His Highest.
And do you have a favorite sound?
The waves at the beach.
And Heather, if someone would like to connect with you, what's the best way for them to do that?
They can find us at heatheravis.com or follow along our journey on Instagram at Macy Makes My Day.
And what parting advice could you offer us today, Heather?
My advice is wherever you're at, if you're holding on to something that you're wanting for your life, that you loosen your grip. Loosen your grip and allow God to do a mighty work in you.
That's great advice, and thank you so much for sharing that. And I want to also thank you too, Heather, for coming on the show today, not only being so generous with your time and your story, but just being an inspiration for us. I really appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you for having me. I really appreciate it.
Thank you for joining me today. And remember, you cannot achieve everything, but you do have the God-given ability to achieve anything. So stay focused, out of fear, and keep on keeping on. Until next time, be well and peaceful. For more information on today's episode and guest, or for resources that will assist you in overcoming your fears, visit livingbeyondyourfears.com. And don't forget to subscribe to this podcast, where 3 times a week we move to a life beyond our fears.